Josh, thank you so much for joining us. Pretty significant major announcement today from the Prime Minister, as we mentioned earlier, that Australia will recognise a state of Palestine in September at the United Nations. What does this move mean?
Look, it's primarily a diplomatic gesture. Australia's got no power, as do any of the other nations, to actually enforce this in practice. What it does is it signals effectively a coalition that are based on the belief that the way forward for that region and for the to end the conflict is to recognise a Palestinian state. It does come with strings attached. So we're talking here excluding Hamas from governance, which is an incredibly tricky, sticking point because there's no guarantees that that could ever happen. Demilitarising Gaza, but also holding democratic elections. Now, another sort of sticking point is that the last time democratic elections were held in 2005, Hamas were actually elected. It could be another militant group. So it's effectively a coalition of like-minded countries making an important diplomatic gesture. However, there is a significant array of potential sticking points moving forward.
There has been some analysis today saying that this does give hope for some type of peace in the Middle East. Do you think this is the right gesture? Do you think this is symbolic that we'll actually don't see this ever working out in reality, in practical sense, as you just said there? And the Prime Minister has flagged this. There are a number of conditions which will be very, very difficult to manage.
Yeah, I think, look, peace is the ideal end state, absolutely. And there's been considerable suffering on both sides. War is horrific by any measure. I think ultimately what we have to look at is the extent to which this results in a meaningful, long-lasting peace and can be enacted. Now, it's important to understand the dynamics of the region. You've got two combatants, effectively. You've got the Israeli government and you've got Hamas, who are antithetically opposed to the existence of one another. And to that extent, it's beyond making this a diplomatic gesture. It's important to understand and I suppose to find out more detail about what this looks like in terms of international support for peace. So not just pressure, but support. What are these different countries going to do to support the peace process moving forward beyond political recognition and potentially empty gestures?
In regards to the reaction, we saw a pretty firm statement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before the Prime Minister made this official announcement today, our time. But he almost intimated that they had been given a heads up that Australia was going to take this stance. It seemed that Benjamin Netanyahu actually singled Australia out. How do you think this plays out for our relationship or dynamic with Israel right now?
Well, I think let's distinguish between the Israeli government and the Israeli people. It's by no means a popular government in the Israeli political landscape. However, it maintains significant power and obviously control over its destiny in terms of Gaza and its international relations and relationships. I think what we've got to understand again is the deep-seated nature of this conflict. I do not think that Israel is inclined in any way, shape or form to take external pressure from other countries on board when it makes its decisions, particularly this government. I think it will make its own decisions about the approach. I think in particular the right of the Israeli government are pretty determined for a more comprehensive victory, as they see it, in Gaza. So I really think that this is an international step. It's diplomacy, but the extent to which it can be enacted and Israel can be forced to comply with any international sort of statements is extremely limited.
And in regards to, and you make a great point distinguishing from Israel and the current Benjamin Netanyahu government, in regards to, again, the criticism of the Prime Minister's announcement today, they have been criticised by the opposition. Susan Lee has come out, and I'm quoting the opposition leader here, saying the government's unilateral decision puts it out of step with Australia's most important ally and most consequential player in the Middle East, the US. We haven't heard, as we're recording this episode, any responses yet from US President Donald Trump. We already know the Prime Minister hasn't been able to get a face-to-face meeting with Mr. Trump as yet. How do you think this situation plays out with our fragile alliance as we see it with the US right now?
Yeah, I think if we're talking realpolitik, which is effectively now governing international relations, particularly so far as the US is concerned, this will the Australian government will certainly be rebuked by the US. I'm not casting any aspersions on whether or not that's a good thing. It's basically a fact that they're likely to strongly condemn and criticise Australia's approach. I think it was always going to be criticised by the Liberal Party in that respect as well. And the main argument is that it rewards instability. It rewards Hamas for taking the actions that they did take on October 7. And to that extent, it's there's obviously significant civilian suffering. And then the extent to which that will be measurable will come into the future. But I think what we're seeing here is a distinguishing of Australian, Canadian, New Zealand, other Anglosphere countries, foreign policies from that of the US, which has deeper, significant long-term implications for that relationship, particularly with potential regional conflict in the near future.
Josh, I'm paraphrasing the Prime Minister when he made this announcement today, but Mr. Albanese said along the lines that the world was shocked and appalled by what is unfolding right now in Gaza, especially the horrific starvation of children, families and civilians. Benjamin Netanyahu, as we mentioned earlier, was adamant about the full takeover of Gaza. Do you think these developments that we've seen over the last couple of hours here will change anything on his stance?
Look, it's got the potential to reinforce the Israeli position. Again, us against them sort of mentality that is adopted by the Netanyahu government. And it's likely, if anything, I would think, to result in the right actually having a little bit of an increased momentum within their own government to get this done and to get it done quickly. It's not popular with his own military. So the reporting goes. I'm not privy to those arguments, and I think as a broader commentary on what we're seeing in Israel and in Gaza, a lot of this is through second and third hand sources. A lot of what we're hearing from the region, from both what's happening on the ground in Gaza, but also within the Israeli government, is coming from second, third, even fourth hand sources, each of them with their own motivation. And I think we've got to be very careful in basically what we're building and what evidence base we're drawing upon in making any decision going forward and in assessing the situation. So I think to that extent, in terms of the realpolitik that dominates now, it may well only harden the Netanyahu government's resolve. Obviously, we'll see.
The UN is set to meet in September next month. We know that's a number of weeks away, but that still is a long time, those weeks, for what's continuing to unfold right now, especially in Gaza. What do you think happens at the UN, Josh?
Look, I think there's considerable momentum internationally. There's been, as I said, the Western states, first France, but then obviously the Anglosphere states coming on board with this. Certainly increases international pressure on Israel. I think at the end of the day, what we're likely to see in voting will be the US potentially using its veto, Israel and a handful of small states voting against any resolution. But as we know and history indicates, that will not necessarily carry any weight on the ground. I think there's, whether for right or for wrong, the conflict will continue until the Israeli government determine that it should cease. So this may well increase pressure on arms manufacturers, other companies that do business with Israel and so on. There's talk of sanctions. The extent to which that occurs is yet to be played out. But I do think ultimately, given the timeline, we may well see a rapid increase in on the ground action. to bring this to a swifter resolution. But obviously, from an Israeli perspective, there's hostages, and from the the international community, in particular, now Australia, there's also civilian suffering, and if anything, forebodes a very violent next couple of months, or next few weeks, I should say, before the UN next meet.
We really appreciate you joining us with your analysis. Thanks so much, Josh.
Thanks for your time.